Hello, and welcome to Sleep Stories World. I'd like to invite you to step into a world of relaxation and tranquility with this bedtime story, designed to help you unwind and de-stress. By engaging in this story, you can embark on a journey that nurtures and soothes your mind, promoting overall well-being through sound, restful sleep. Before we begin, let's prepare your space for rest. Ensure you're somewhere comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything, your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, please do so now. When you're ready, lie down and let yourself settle into your bed. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket as your body relaxes. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Your only task now is to be here, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand. Breathe out, feeling your body sink deeper into your bed. In and out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. Now, imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, carrying with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your chest. As you breathe out, imagine it spreading gently through your upper body. Breathe in, and let the light expand through your shoulders, your arms, your back. Breathe out, and feel it filling your stomach, your neck, your head, every space within you glowing softly. If a thought comes by, acknowledge it like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream, and then let it drift away. There will be time for those thoughts later. Now is for rest. On your next breath in, let the warm light travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, your knees. Breathe out, and sense it flowing down to your ankles, to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Focus on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. If your mind wanders, simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey toward sleep. And now, let us begin. The voyage of the James Caird across the Scotia Sea remains one of the most extraordinary feats of seamanship and navigation in maritime history. 6 men in a boat barely longer than a car, crossing 800 miles of the world's most violent ocean, with primitive navigation equipment and no way to communicate with the outside world. If they failed, no one would ever know what happened to them. The Southern Ocean that surrounds Antarctica is unique on Earth. It's the only place where ocean waters circle the globe uninterrupted by land, creating a highway for storms that build and build with nothing to slow them down. Sailors call this region the Furious 50s and the Screaming 60s, named for the latitudes where the winds howl with relentless force. Waves in these waters regularly reach heights of 40 to 50 feet, and in severe storms, they can tower even higher. From the very first day, the James Caird was battered by enormous seas. The makeshift canvas decking that McNish had constructed provided some protection from the waves that constantly broke over the boat, but water still poured in through every gap and seam. 2 men were always assigned to bailing, scooping water out with any container they could use, while the others managed the sails, steered, or tried to rest in the cramped, wet space beneath the canvas. Navigation fell to Frank Worsley, and it was a task of exceptional difficulty. To determine their position, Worsley needed to take sightings of the sun or stars using a sextant, a delicate instrument that requires a clear view of the horizon and steady hands. But the boat was in constant violent motion, rising and plunging on enormous swells, and the sky was often obscured by clouds and spray. Worsley had to time his observations for those brief moments when the boat crested a wave and the sun might be visible through a gap in the clouds. During the entire 16-day journey, he was able to take only 4 reliable sun sights. 4 observations to navigate 800 miles across open ocean. It was navigation of almost miraculous accuracy. The cold was relentless. The men were constantly soaked, and ice formed on the outside of the boat and on the sails. Their clothes never dried, and they had no way to warm themselves except huddling together in the cramped space under the canvas. Their sleeping bags became sodden and useless. They took turns at the tiller, steering the boat through the mountainous seas, their hands so cold they could barely feel the wooden handle. Their food was minimal, mostly biscuits and dried meat, which they tried to warm over a small primus stove. But lighting the stove in the violently pitching boat was dangerous and often impossible. Sometimes they went days eating only cold food, their bodies desperate for the warmth and energy that a hot meal provides. They melted ice for drinking water, but the process was slow and fuel was precious. Thirst became a constant companion, despite being surrounded by endless water. On the 5th day out, May 5, 1916, they encountered a storm so severe that Shackleton later wrote it was the worst he had ever experienced in his 26 years at sea. Waves towered above them, their crests blown into horizontal sheets of spray by winds that screamed at over 70 miles per hour. The men could do nothing but run before the wind, trusting that the James Caird would somehow rise over each massive wave rather than being swamped and sunk. At one point during this storm, Shackleton was at the tiller when he looked back and saw what he first thought was a break in the clouds, a line of clearing sky. Then he realized with horror that it was not sky at all, but the face of a wave larger than any he had ever seen, a wall of water perhaps 60 feet high bearing down on them. He shouted a warning, and seconds later the wave broke over the James Caird with tremendous force, nearly capsizing the tiny boat. Water poured in, and for several terrifying moments they thought they were sinking. But the boat somehow stayed upright, and the men bailed frantically, throwing water over the side as fast as their exhausted arms could move. After 16 days of this ordeal, 16 days of constant cold, wet, sleeplessness, and fear, Worsley's navigation proved astoundingly accurate. On May 8, 1916, they sighted land. Through the mist and spray, they could see the towering mountains of South Georgia Island. They had crossed 800 miles of the most dangerous ocean on Earth and found a target just 54 miles wide. If Worsley's navigation had been off by even a few degrees, they would have missed the island entirely and sailed past it into the vastness of the Atlantic, where they would certainly have perished. But sighting the island was not the same as landing safely. The side of South Georgia they approached was the uninhabited southern coast, a wall of cliffs and glacier pounded by massive surf. They needed to reach the northern coast, where the whaling stations were located. For 2 more days, they struggled along the coast, searching for a place to land while being driven dangerously close to the rocks by wind and waves. Finally, on May 10, 1916, they found a small cove on the southern coast where they could land the boat. They dragged the James Caird up onto the rocky beach and collapsed, too exhausted even to celebrate. They had made it to South Georgia, but they were on the wrong side of the island, separated from the whaling stations by 32 miles of unmapped, glacier-covered mountains that had never been crossed. After a week of rest and recovery, eating birds and drinking fresh water for the first time in weeks, Shackleton assessed their situation. The boat was too damaged and the men too weak to sail around the island to the whaling stations. Their only option was to cross the mountain range on foot. It was a journey that no one had ever attempted, across terrain that was completely unknown. Shackleton chose 2 men to accompany him, Worsley, because they would need his navigation skills, and Tom Crean, because of his enormous physical strength and unflappable temperament. The other 3 men, McNish, McCarthy, and Vincent, would remain with the James Caird. They were in the worst physical condition and couldn't manage the mountain crossing. On May 19, 1916, at 2 o'clock in the morning under a full moon, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean set out to cross South Georgia. They carried minimal equipment, a rope, an axe, a small stove, enough food for 3 days, and a carpenter's adze that could serve as an ice axe. They wore the same filthy, salt-crusted clothing they had worn for months. They had no map, no climbing equipment, and no idea what lay ahead except that they had to cross multiple mountain peaks and glacier to reach Stromness whaling station on the other side. The crossing of South Georgia took 36 hours of nearly continuous walking and climbing. They navigated by moonlight and instinct, choosing routes that seemed possible and turning back when they encountered cliffs or impassable crevasses. They climbed peaks over 3,000 feet high, crossed glacier riddled with hidden crevasses, and descended slopes so steep that at one point they sat down, tied themselves together, and slid thousands of feet down a snow slope in the darkness, hoping they wouldn't hit rocks at the bottom. They kept moving because stopping for long in the extreme cold would mean death. When exhaustion threatened to overcome them, they took turns sleeping. One man would sleep for 5 minutes while the other 2 kept watch, then they would wake him and continue. It was a forced march beyond the normal limits of human endurance. At 7 o'clock in the morning on May 20, 1916, as dawn was breaking, they heard a sound that stopped them in their tracks. It was a steam whistle, the whistle from the whaling station, calling the workers to begin their day. They were close. They pushed on with renewed energy, and a few hours later they stumbled down the final slope and walked into Stromness whaling station. The whalers who saw them approach couldn't believe what they were seeing. 3 men who looked like filthy, bearded ghosts, their clothing in rags, their faces blackened by smoke and frostbite, walking out of mountains that no one had ever crossed. When Shackleton asked to see the station manager, though Ralph Saul, whom he had met before, Saul didn't recognize him at first. Then, when Shackleton identified himself, Saul's first question was simple and profound: when was the war over? Shackleton hadn't thought about the war in months. "The war is not over," he replied. "Millions are being killed. Europe is mad. The world is mad." It was May 1916, and the Battle of Jutland, the largest naval battle of World War I, was taking place at that very moment in the North Sea. The Battle of Verdun had been raging for months. But Shackleton's war had been against ice and ocean, and now his focus was singular: rescue the men on Elephant Island. Within hours of arriving at Stromness, Shackleton had arranged for a boat to sail around South Georgia to pick up the 3 men left with the James Caird. McNish, McCarthy, and Vincent were rescued that same day, May 20, 1916. All 6 men who had made the boat journey were now safe. But 22 men still waited on Elephant Island, over 800 miles away. Shackleton immediately began organizing a rescue expedition, but this proved far more difficult than he had anticipated. It was now winter in the Antarctic, and the ice around Elephant Island would be extensive. He would need a ship strong enough to push through pack ice, and he would need it quickly before winter conditions made rescue impossible. Shackleton's first rescue attempt was on a whaling ship, the Southern Sky, but they encountered heavy pack ice 60 miles from Elephant Island and had to turn back. A second attempt in a Uruguayan ship, the Instituto de Pesca No. 1, also failed when ice blocked their approach. A third attempt in a small wooden schooner borrowed from the British government in the Falkland Islands, the Emma, came within 20 miles of the island before being stopped by ice. Each failed attempt meant more weeks of delay, and Shackleton was tormented by the thought of his men waiting, not knowing if help would ever come. Finally, the Chilean government offered the use of a small steel-hulled steamship, the Yelcho. On August 25, 1916, Shackleton made his 4th rescue attempt. This time, conditions were favorable. The ice had temporarily cleared, and the Yelcho was able to approach Elephant Island closely. On August 30, 1916, 4 months and 16 days after Shackleton had left them, the 22 men on Elephant Island saw a ship approaching. Frank Wild, who had kept the men organized and hopeful throughout their ordeal, ordered everyone to pack their belongings immediately. When the ship anchored offshore and small boats were launched, the men lined up on the beach. Shackleton stood in the bow of the rescue boat, counting the figures on the beach as they came into view. 1, 2, 3, he counted silently. When he reached 22, he turned to the ship's captain and said simply, "They are all there. They are all saved." Not a single man had been lost. The rescue was completed in less than an hour. The weather was changing, and Shackleton didn't want to risk being trapped by ice. The men scrambled aboard with their few possessions, leaving behind the makeshift camp where they had survived for over 4 months under 2 overturned boats. As the Yelcho steamed away from Elephant Island, heading north toward Chilean civilization, the men of the Endurance expedition were finally, truly safe. In the stillness of this night, as you rest, consider what these men achieved, not through conquest or reaching a geographical goal, but through survival itself, through loyalty to one another, and through Shackleton's unwavering determination that not a single life would be lost. It was, in its way, a greater triumph than reaching any pole.